Thanks, Yaz, and thanks everyone. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we've tried to pack too much in, bringing conversations to a close that are really stimulating. What we would like you to do is get together with the people on your table, so if you're kind of not on a table, and we're just going to ask you 3 questions. Oops, not that one. Yeah, we're just going to ask you 3 questions and ask you to reflect on those on your table. So the first one of those is based on everything you've heard today, so thinking back to the workshops and the talks and the different contributions, the conversations that you've had possibly outside of those workshops, what for you are the biggest challenges in working with young men, boys and young men, right now? Okay. So we're gonna, is there okay. So then one or a couple of people on your table, on your phone, if you go to menti.com and use the code that's at the top of the slide.
And one of the main things that I've noticed is that there is they struggle, for the most part, kind of having a safe space to even understand or discover who they are as individuals. And, you know, anger's been used quite a lot today. And that is something that I see a lot with the young boys that I work with. It's almost like they don't have any other sort of solution or way to express how they feel. So it's almost like anger is the only kind of emotion that they can use in order for them to be seen. And then on the flip side of it, because I work in a lot of schools, a lot of young boys who do get angry, it's, well, we know how the school system can work in a lot of cases, and it's quite hard to kind of do a job there. So a lot of young boys who are in a certain situation where they are acting out, there's a lot of things that are happening at home, within their local communities, but when they are in school, you know, as a teacher, they'll just see that young person misbehaving. So that kind of, all of the backgrounds or the whys kind of get ignored, and that kind of perpetuates that idea of, well, I'm just a piece of shit, and that kind of then adds to the wider picture of, well, who actually cares. So that's probably, well, one of the things I see. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I can see you picked up a lot of the threads that are already up on the slide. Anyone else on this one before we move to the next one, the biggest challenges on the basis of what we've heard today?
Yeah, I mean, putting together some of the bits that were said in that last plea is really important, because the notion that, like, do we start from people's, you know, masculinity and femininity and that sort of stuff and gender, or do we end up wanting to aspire to the bit where that becomes irrelevant, actually, and we just are human beings in our entirety, etc. For me, it's that journey, and the metaphor I use is like that notion of turning the volume up and down. So actually, yeah, we are working with the young men. That's what today is about. That's what, you know, we can't say that's not happening. But it is our responsibility to turn the volume down on that gender and turn it up on humanity. And that, for me, is the progress we're making. And that's the biggest challenge, especially for us as men, male workers, is saying, you know, we often find it hard to engage with young men. We have a set of values that we believe and we've had the chance to develop at 30, 40, 50, whatever. You know, these young men haven't had that chance to develop, and we are actually partly their chance to develop that. And we have to accept that as a responsibility. And we have to be able to go home most nights and say, have I just engaged with that group of young men and they think I'm okay and I wasn't rejected? I haven't been rejected, brilliant, yeah? Or can we go home and say, but I did turn the volume up one way and I turned it down the other. Did I fulfill my professional responsibility, my educator's responsibility to do something that was challenging? Or did I just play it easy? And the other tool for that is what I call working on the edge of young men's familiarity. So yes, play football with young men, it engages with them, they might like that. But did we do that volume switch? Did we talk about like the football game, but at the same time talk about caring in relation to that football, which is not what they're familiar with. They're familiar with the football, but they're not familiar with thinking about, did I care for someone on that? Did I support someone on that? Did I have some fears during that process, that game? And if I'm being asked, when was I fearful in that game? Oh yeah, it might have been when I was being tackled. But no one ever talks to them about that because people stay, their work is stay in the comfort zone. So we have to push ourselves to work with young men on the edge of what's familiar in order to be able to do that volume swap, I think.
Okay, and so thank you, Carls. And secondly, and I think this follows on really nicely, what do you see as the greatest hope right now, or opportunity in work with men and boys, with young men and boys? Based on what you've heard today, based on what you thought about, what do you see as the biggest hope or opportunity? Or opportunities? Desire. I think we're going to need to unpack some of these because it's not clear. So, what desire to address? Well, let's just hear from a different table. What was going on over here? Hopes and opportunities.
Struggle to fit it into 16 characters.
Okay, yeah.
We were talking about representation. We were chatting about representation and actually how the internet is a positive thing, and kind of Netflix has been a lot better in streaming platforms in terms of reducing that bias so that we're not just seeing the same stories constantly, and that there's hope within that. We were chatting about shiny, sparkly kind of hope of working with young people, and actually that generation that are coming back through, it feels like they're experiencing a lot more, and they're although they're absorbing that and taking it all in, that's a lot of pressure, they're a lot more accepting, and that we kept talking about this generational compounding some of those issues, but actually hopefully this new generation coming up are a lot more accepting, they're experiencing a lot more, and that gives us a lot of hope in terms of what that's going to mean and how that's going to inflict and impact systems as they grow up.
Thank you. So I guess the backlash that we're seeing is a backlash in response to a wider social shift, which a huge amount of which is positive. Okay. Anyone else on hopes, opportunities? Yes.
I suppose for me, I was talking about earlier around so one of my parents struggled with their mental health, and it took about 20 years to get over that shame and stigma where I think the new generation, that stigma just around things like depression is not seen as how it was 20 years ago, and things like anxiety, that representation of having young people in the public eye talking openly about mental health, I think that is a great thing to see. And especially as workers, if we've got a young person we're working with, we can say, oh, this person in the public eye is struggling with this, and where that just wasn't there 20 years ago. So I think that's really important, especially when we're trying to engage them. There's a lot more like YouTubers talking about mental health, and so there's so much more material that we can use when trying to engage with them.
Thank you. Okay, it's Friday afternoon. It's been a really long day. I think our energy is waning, and let's get out and socialise and just take this to a more informal level. We've got one more question for you, and this is just on this thing of we've come here today actually from quite a lot, from different sectors and from different approaches, but we've come around this question of working with men and boys around mental health, men's violence and masculinity. what should be our priorities going forward? Where should we focus our energies? Based on what you've heard today, what should be our priorities going forward? Just a couple of minutes. A single line on mentally. So, does someone want to shout something in on what should be our priority going forward? What were you talking about?
Going to this table. Priorities for the future. Anybody want to jump in? Somebody's gone quiet. Somebody somewhere. Go for it.
Thank you. So we've been talking about moving away from the punitive models of society, prison systems. Talking about some young people I support in my work. Going to secondary school, and when I was at school, it was called detention. But now the kids are coming to me and saying, "Oh, I was put in isolation at school." And I think about a language and the power of that, and our school systems, is telling children that we can't manage your behaviour, we can't support you with your emotional needs, so we're going to isolate you or put you in a room on your own. What sort of message does that send to our young people? I feel the needs of focusing on kind of more restorative, mediation and conflict resolution that calls people in rather than calling them out on their behaviour and their choices.
So, obviously I didn't go to all the talks, so I don't know what was said, but I think obviously we've done a lot of talk about engaging the younger generation, and that is very important going forward, but I think our priorities also should be engaging the older generation as well. That's what we were talking about, because unfortunately still in large pockets of communities and cultures, violence is still sort of advocated towards women, and a lot of young people learn that behaviour from the older generation. So yeah, we should be sort of focusing a lot of our engagement with the younger generation, but also sort of incorporating the older generation in as well, and sort of breaking down why they're teaching the younger generation that sort of behaviour, and sort of, I think that would be quite important moving forward, because unfortunately a lot of those younger generations still obviously are talking very well, but I think the younger generation are still very influenced, and they will take what they've learned from the older generation, it'll just pass on and on and on, it'll just be a vicious cycle that will continue. So that cycle needs to break, so we need to be having those conversations with the older generations.
Thank you. And I guess the punitive justice system point kind of relates to that quite a lot, because how if kids are learning that power and punishment is the way that wrongs are corrected in school, and we need to be working with teachers as well, and then we're going to see those ripples out. Okay, thank you. I hope that this bit has given you something to kind of think about, and you've been able to have some conversations across your tables. We're going to come to the end today. I'd just like to, it's wonderful to see so many people still here at almost 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. We've really packed it in today. It's been fantastic to hear from all of our presenters and the people that I've managed to talk to, and I'm sure you've all had stimulating conversations. We would really appreciate it if you could fill out the evaluation form, the feedback and evaluation form, not necessarily now, but if you have a chance to do it now, that'd be great. Yeah? Oh, is it not there? Sorry. I press share rather than share. Okay, there we go. But if you'll just join me in a final round of applause and thank you to the organisers, presenters, and to yourselves. It's been a great day.